Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session of moral lessons from the Quran. Today we'll be, as usual, selecting a passage from the Quran, and the passage selected today is from Surah Dhariyat. This is the 51st Surah of the Quran, and the verses that we will study today are from 15 to 19. I'm just going to read out the text and translation first. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Innal muttaqina fi jannatin wa uyun akhizina ma atahum rabbuhum innahum kanu qabla dhalika muhsinin كانوا قليلا من الليل ما يهجعون وبالأسحار هم يستغفرون وفي أموالهم حق للسائل والمحروم. Indeed, the righteous shall dwell amidst gardens and springs, receiving what has been blessed to them by their Lord. Indeed, they had been among the virtuous before. They slept but little at night, and in the early hours of dawn sought forgiveness, and in whose wealth the deprived and those who asked had a share. So you can see, my dear participants, that the verse actually starts off with these glad tidings that as far as the righteous are concerned, they shall be amidst springs and gardens, and they will be receiving what their God has blessed them. آخِذِينَ مَا آتَاهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ. So as far as the description of paradise is concerned, clearly it is something that the Quran has done full justice to. And of course, one of the reasons that this is described in more detail is that the Arabs of those times who had a particular imagination or a particular view about the blissful life and luxurious life. So the details of the paradise, which are generally described in the Quran, they are in conformity with what those Arabs thought would be a place that could be described as an ultimate place of residence. And in order to, of course, cater for the later audiences, the Almighty has then extended this description at so many places by saying that not only will you have these gardens and these orchards and grapes and fruits of all kinds and streams running under those mountains, because to the Arabs the ideal orchard would be one which would be placed on high ground, for example on the mountain top, because this would protect it from not only winds and storms, but also from water and some other calamities. And for them this was something of an ideal. So if you find this description of paradise in the Quran, always think that this is presented in view or keeping in view the likeness of the foremost adversaries. So I have been discussing this at a number of occasions, that the Quran is located in a time and space continuum, which does not mean that it is not relevant today. It does mean, however, that there are issues which relate to the foremost adversaries, because it was addressed to them. It was revealed in 7th century Arabia to the Prophet Muhammad, and of course the adversaries were his own nation, the people of the Quraysh, people who had adopted idolatry as their religion. So another thing that you'll find rampant in the Quran, anyone who's read the Quran in detail, that idolatry and polytheism is mentioned at length. And today, when of course the Abrahamic faiths and faiths which ascribe to monotheism, and probably they are in majority, when they read this book, they do find this question arising in their minds, that what exactly is the relevance of some of the things which no longer exist in this world. Well, they do need to understand this this localized address of the Quran at places, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't have any eternal message or a universal message. Yes, that message, of course, is always there, but it complements the message we already have ingrained in our own innate guidance. So the Quran complements that, and it does so in a way that we are able to realize that this is something that which is our absolute need. And then it adds to just one sentence to the description of paradise in order to make it relevant for all times to come. It says that as far as paradise is concerned, you will have everything that you desire. وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَشْتَهِي أَنفُسُكُمْ. Whatever is your heart's desire, whatever would be your wish would be granted, which of course is something which everyone who will inshallah land there will be able to acquire. So paradise is the reward of basically the deeds that we have done today. It is the basic motivation for which we do good deeds. Obviously, we do good deeds to please the Almighty, but the pleasure of the Almighty, the consequence of that pleasure is that He rewards people for being obedient to Him. And this obedience and following the true path is something which we all know is not going to benefit God at all, because, of course, this is not going to increase or decrease His kingdom in any way. By being righteous and by pleasing God, of course, as a result, is something which is going to benefit ourselves. If we are righteous for our own self. We gain for that. The amount of respect we gain as a result, of course, and then, of course, there are trials which, because of following the right path, we are put through that, but that doesn't mean that the Almighty is not going to take them into account. So at other places, the Quran has said that paradise is basically a reward of your own patience and perseverance, especially because of the fact that we are made to pass through so many trials and tribulations in life. We come across so many problems which relate to poverty, illness, similarly stricken and straitened circumstances. And if we show the right attitude, the Almighty has said that, well, this is how He is going to reward His patience and righteous servants. So, innal muttaqina fi zilalin wa uyun, and the description of paradise you'll find often occurs in a way that you'll find that it is discussed in opposition to the description of the disbeliever. So here particularly the verse is innal muttaqina fi jannatin wa uyun. At other instances it is innal muttaqina fi zilalin wa uyun. Zilal, of course, means shade, signifying the fact that they'll be in the shade of large trees. And again, the insinuation is that contrary to the hot weather of Arabia of those times, there would be such large trees which would shade them that they will not feel the heat of the sun. The reason for all this, of course, is then cited is that innahum kanu qabla zalika muhsinin. So the reason that they are being given these favors is they had been among the virtuous. They were the righteous individuals. They didn't have any ulterior motive or selfish motive, so to speak, as far as doing good is concerned, as far as righteousness is concerned. They were the ones who set example. And when they set example for everyone, it was for the purpose of showing them that, yes, we should revive our belief in humanity. We should trust people who are still found in this world where there is injustice and oppression, and so rampant is this injustice and oppression that at times we tend to lose hope or lose faith in humanity itself. But then there are these individuals that we can find here and there, not only in our history, but even in the times that we are living. And these are like unsung heroes. They are individuals who might be doing some very small acts of kindness which might not even come into your notice, caring for patients or looking after widows and orphans, similarly providing young children for their school fee, etc. And these are efforts which go on side by side in our society at so many instances by so many people, and they are doing this in a very silent way. They have no projection in mind. And this is how we have to understand it. Although, yes, we find evil in this world, but no less is the content and the quantity of people who are so righteous, and they are so steadfast in this righteousness that they silently work away and do these things, and they literally deserve to be called as unsung heroes. And I said, it is this aspect of humanity, or these unsung heroes, which really revive our faith in humanity. So it says that innahum kanu qabla zalika muhsinin, that the reason that they are being rewarded with paradise is that they were righteous individuals in their past lives, and there was people who would always care for others. And one of the traits which is mentioned of them is kanu kalila min al-layli ma yahja'un وَبِالْأَسْحَارِ هُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ. They are the ones who used to sleep very little at night. They used to get up early in the morning before the Fajr prayer, seek God's forgiveness. وَبِالْأَسْحَارِ هُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ. For of course, this is something that all of us need. We have every day there is some blemish that emanates from us. We make mistakes, we do sins, we are ashamed of even expressing them. But this is what the righteous do: that they wake up every morning early before dawn, and they offer the prayer, which is the tahajjud prayer, and kanu qalila min al-layli ma yahjaun, that they seldom sleep at night, which always keeps them awake, that they have to connect with the Almighty. Today, in this holy month of Ramadan, obviously we are provided with this opportunity to pray the tahajjud at its own time, at its right time. So before Sehri, if we are able to pray tahajjud, this would be a great benefit that we can acquire from this holy month, because of being awake at Sehri time. But other than that, also during the rest of the year, it's always a good thing, a recommended thing, that we make plans of trying to offer this prayer. This is the most blessed prayer after all obligatory prayers. After all mandatory prayers, the prayer which gets the reward the most is the tahajjud prayer. And the Almighty says that this is the prayer which is a time in which everyone is sleeping, perhaps even Satan is sleeping. But remember that this is the time when the Almighty expects his people, that they break their sleep. And remember, it's in the middle of the night or in the second part of the night, and all of us, we are so sleepy that even a call of nature we would avoid as far as possible. So such is this dominance that grips us when we are sleeping. So when we wake up by breaking our sleep at night and stand in prayer and not only ask for forgiveness but also thank the Almighty for his favors, this is something which is of it earns immense blessings. It is one of the most, as I said, blessed times for God to accept our supplications. There is a narrative ascribed to Prophet Muhammad in which he has said that the Almighty descends to the lowest heavens, which of course means that he directs his attention to the people of the earth, and he says that, is there anyone who would like to express a wish and I could fulfill it, and is there anyone who would ask for forgiveness and I would forgive him? So this is like a bonus time that we are given, and let us try our best. Of course, in the month of Ramadan, this is something which is readily available, but other than that, every once in a while, maybe once a week, when we are able to get up and plan to be awakened at that time. If we have a holiday the next day, it's always easy to pray tahajjud. And of course, if you have to sleep after that, then the holiday is always there. So this is something of a very recommended thing, and one of the things which makes us high achievers as Muslims. Remember, there is this minimum amount that we are required to do, which is of course the mandatory prayer and some of the other mandatory acts of worship. But then there are certain other things which are over and above those mandatory acts, which make us high achievers, which make us closer to God. And when we in our professional life always wish that we become high achievers and gain as much as we would like to, it is all the more reason that we should always think that as servants of God, as people who would like to be close to him, let us try to become high achievers. Let us become as close to him as possible, because this is something which would lend us the strength of character to combat evil, to overcome the desires that we often are at times adversely affected with. So that the Tahajjud prayer is something which is extremely important in this regard. And finally, the passage then ends on the words that again reflect our sincerity for the society, and it says, وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ, which means that in whose wealth the deprived and those who ask have a share. This is something which we need to understand, that as far as being blessed by the Almighty through various things like, of course, a house or a good living standard that we have, these favors of God, they have to be shared with other people. And the Almighty has said that there is a minimum mandatory amount that we must share, and that is precisely what is called zakat. And you can see that this is a Meccan surah. And even in Mecca, this was something which had been imposed on Muslims when the state had not yet been formed in Medina. And this shows that even today, if there is no state who collects or which collects zakat, even then we must disperse zakat. And as far as zakat is concerned, it needs a separate mention and maybe a separate whole explanation, because the concept of zakat has over the years become so misunderstood, and people generally regard it to be a charity fund or a poor fund, which is exactly it is not. I mean, it is not merely a charity fund. Zakat is basically a tax. Besides being a worship ritual, it has two facets. One facet is that it is a worship ritual like salah, and therefore you find it being mentioned side by side with salah, aqimus salata wa atu zakah. And on the other hand, it is also the sole tax which a government can impose on its Muslim citizens, which means that actually this is the tax that you give to the government so that it can run the affairs of state. So exactly on the principles of a welfare state, this money is given to the state so that the state can then disperse it for the poor, for the needy, for all kinds of other benefits which our citizens require, including hospitals and schools and all projects of public welfare. This is how you pay to the government, and it pays back to you as a result. So this is something which is always at times undercalculated, or I would say that we are not very vigilant in calculating our zakat. It is very important that in this month of Ramadan, we make this effort, especially because most people disperse zakat in this month, that we calculate the exact amount of zakat which is imposed on us, and disperse it. And if it's a large amount, we can always disperse it in installments. And if we have already paid it in the form of taxes, then of course the amount which is over and above those taxes can always be utilized the next month. So therefore, you have to understand that the zakat that the taxes that we pay can be subtracted from our zakat, because that is precisely why zakat is collected. It's exactly the same reason as taxes are collected. So therefore, if you have paid zakat, you can subtract your zakat from your tax from your zakat liability. So with these words, I'm going to end my talk today, and I am now available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. I'll begin with a question that was asked yesterday and we couldn't take it. It was in relation with people because of being sick, if they miss some fast, and you proposed two situations. One, when one full meal should be given to a person who needs, money or the food to eat, or three meals. So the question was, how would a lay person having no particular knowledge of this particular clause would know whether to go for three full meals or one meal?
Right. Well, actually, you see, this is a style of Arabic in which there is a certain amount of discretion which has been given to the people who pay. The word used is ta'amu miskin, which means you feed a needy person. And there is a certain amount of leverage when we say that you can feed a needy person. So the minimum amount of that feeding would be, of course, one meal. And common sense entails that the maximum amount would be if you feed that person for one whole day, which would be like 3 meals. So the fact that the words used by the Quran, they can encapsulate both a minimum amount and a maximum amount. The Quran does not specify. So generally, people who are able to afford just one meal to be given as fidya, it's perfectly all right. But if you go beyond and you give more than one meal, like for example, a whole day's meal, this would be like fulfilling God's directive in a very outstanding and a very befitting way. So the style of the Quranic verse is actually something which points to that. And obviously, it's not expected from a common person to understand this style. So they should have recourse to scholars and individuals who are able to understand such verses and explain them to them.
Thank you. Just one more written question. Could we offer only one rakah for witr at Isha prayers? Because witr means odd one.
So the minimum amount of witr is 3. Because when you are making something odd, it has you have to have something before it to make it odd. One is something which is, odd in itself, but the words are out there. The word means that you have to convert your prayer into an odd number. So the minimum amount is actually 3, because if you do it 1, that exactly is the amount through which you actually make a certain even number odd. So there has to be some even number already prayed, after which you pray an odd rakat in order to make the whole count as odd.
Okay, thank you. Fatma, you can ask your question now.
Assalamu alaikum. So during
Well,
your lecture, what I understood was this, that uh, one has to do good deeds without any selfish or ulterior motive. But the way I look at it, like if you do good deeds for Jannah, isn't that a selfish motive? Like you are selfish at the core.
I mean, this is selfishness for the right cause. If you call it selfishness, then yes, this is selfishness, but this is something that we all, if we don't have that incentive, after a while, we would lose our motivation to do anything good. Remember, human nature is something which is always prone to incentives, and it works as a result of these incentives. In the absence of incentives, obviously, we can still do certain things, but you will realize that people who don't have any incentive and do the good for the sake of good, uh, after a couple of maybe months or years, they will lose that motivation, because you see, you have to have that drive that when you do something good, that good is going to lead you to something. This is a many human beings are made like this, that they are deficient, they have something of a something which lacks in them. When you do something without any incentive, this is generally the path which is suggested by the ascetics or the Sufis, or people who uphold this philosophy. And I think it is only God who is so self-sufficient that he doesn't require any motivation to do anything. As human beings, we have to realize that we are weak individuals, and it is incentive that keeps us going. Look at all the undertakings that we do in this world. Almost all of them are attached with some incentive or the other. Even if a mother is doing something for her children, if you are doing something for people in any way, the incentive is something for a person who is a believer. The foremost incentive, of course, is to please God. And as far as ending up in paradise is concerned, that is just a consequence of pleasing God. So there is a step in between, and you do righteous things, of course, for the sake of those righteous things, you do them. But there is a thing which is attached to that, and that is that you do those righteous things with the incentive that you are going to please God. And pleasing God itself is a motivation, and then that motivation is further backed with this consequence that when you please Him, He is going to further reward you. So I think that this is in line with our human nature, and it's only if we negate this frailty of human nature that we might end up in this philosophy. And I said that ascetics and a lot of people who believe in Sufism, they do think that doing good merely for the sake of good is what is required. And I do think that this is human. I mean, this is like being a superhuman, and we can be superhumans for some time, but not all the time.
So basically, we can say that there is a healthy selfishness and then an unhealthy selfishness. So I think that it's just being selfish in a healthy way.
If you would like to term this as healthy selfishness, that is fine. I would say that it's a healthy reward that you get for the righteous attitude that you adopt. So it's just a matter of coining words or understanding them. The Quran doesn't call this to be something which is healthy selfishness. It calls it the fact that this is the reward of pleasing God. And again, it defines the fact that pleasing God is not something which God needs for himself. I mean, it's not a selfish act on his part that he would like to be happy because you're doing something happy. No, his pleasure is based on the fact that when you please him, you're actually doing something which is good for you. If you're speaking the truth, if you're doing just things, then this would please God. But if you don't do those things, they're not going to be damaging God's kingdom in any way. So the pleasure of God itself is something which rests on our own well-being. And as a result, I mean, you can compare this with for example,
okay, that's basically not God's need; it's our need.
our own need that we do it.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Rajni, you can have your question now.
Assalamu alaikum.
Why, so,
I wanted to know, is it permissible to read the Quran on a phone without wuzu? If I can recite it
absolutely.
without wudu or with wudu, so can I recite it while laying on bed or in periods? Is the reward is same or less if I read Quran from a mobile or recite from memory rather than read Quran from the book, the Musab, the Codex?
As far as reading the Quran is concerned, even if women are passing through their menstrual cycles, there is nothing in the Sharia which prohibits them from even touching the Musaf. They can even touch the Musaf, read it directly from the Musaf. This is a misconception that has found its way amongst Muslim women. Otherwise, what is prohibited when they are going through their menstrual cycles is, you can count them on your fingers. There are three things. One, when they are passing through their cycles, they should not pray. Two, they should not fast. And three, they should not do the tawaf if they have gone for Umrah or Hajj. These are the only three prohibitions which are unanimously handed down from the Prophet. As far as touching the Quran is concerned, by the way, touching the Quran in a state of wuzu in itself is not something which is a mandatory thing. Other than that, if women are passing through their cycles, whether they touch the cell phones or they touch the codex or the book itself, or recited out of their hearts, this is absolutely fine as far as the Sharia is concerned. Yes, it could be a matter of personal taste or a personal preference that at times women might not feel comfortable, but this is something which is entirely their own personal choice. They should remember that the Sharia has not prohibited them in any way, in touching or reading the Quran when they are passing through their cycles.
Or is the reward is equivalent, sir, from read from the Quran, a phone or a app?
Absolutely. I mean, all that you need to do is you read to the Quran, because today our apps, they have replaced books. They have replaced so many other written content. So there is absolutely no difference.
Okay. So we can recite it while laying on bed?
Yes, we can. I mean, generally phones, we use phones while we are lying down. And this is something that can be done.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Sir, why bitter is referred as tahajjud?
Because witr is itself something which was offered by the Prophet Muhammad at Tahajjud time, and because he allowed people who could not wake up at Tahajjud time for various reasons. For example, even if they wake up, they might not be remembering the Quran a lot, or might be difficult for them to do so. So he actually gave this concession that the witr can be prayed with the Isha prayer. Otherwise, witr and tahajjud, they are synonymous terms. They mean the same thing. So witr is actually to be prayed at tahajjud. It is only in its concession form that we pray it with the Isha prayer.
Sir, as per my knowledge, everyone offered the bitter after Isha. So everyone offered tahajjud namaz, because tahajjud is the namaz which is offered by 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. Up before Fajr namaz. So if anyone do not offer bitter namaz after Isha, then Isha namaz will complete or not?
Of course, it will be completed. As far as Isha prayer is concerned, it is completed if you just pray 4 rakat of farz. That is all. That completes the Isha prayer. And for that matter, every other prayer, if you complete or pray or offer the mandatory rakats, which is 2 for Fajr, 4 for Zuhr, 4 for Asr, 3 for Maghrib, and 4 for Isha, this completes all these prayers. If you offer any other rakats like the Sunnah or the Nawafil, they are all over and above. They will earn you a lot of reward, but they are not at all obligatory.
In connection to the question about witr, I have a written question here. Could there be 7, 9, or 11 rakah in for the witr without sitting for the final tashahhud?
So what exactly is the person suggesting, that you are praying simultaneously?
Yeah, instead of having 3 rakahs, Yeah, instead of having 3 rakats, could they be 7, 9, or 11 without saying the salam? Because in one salam, in one continuation.
So what you're doing is that you're praying 2 rakats or maybe 8 rakats continuously, and then praying the ninth as witr.
Yeah, perhaps that's what they mean.
You see, the Prophet generally would do his witr with there are 3 or 4 methods which have been handed down from the Prophet, and I think it's good that you follow those methods. And they included that at times he would do, whenever he would offer 4 rakats in succession, like 4, 8, 12, then he would make them odd through 3 rakats. And whenever he would pray 2, 2, he would make them odd by 1 rakat, like the way we do today, normally in our, after our Isha prayers. And then there are some other methods as well which have been, which he used to follow in order to create a little more variety. So I think it's better if we follow what the Prophet himself did. And if you'd like to have the details, those 4 methods have actually been mentioned by my teacher, Ustaz Ghamidi, in his Mizan. I'm forgetting one of or 2 of the other ones which you can consult wherever at the place where he has described the Tahajjud prayer. He has actually explained those 4 ways in which the Prophet would offer Tahajjud. So I think you should just consult it, and perhaps it is better to follow one of them.
Is there any limit to the odd number of rakas for witr? That's another limb of the question.
There is not. The Prophet would not go beyond 13, but as I said, this was something which was mandatory upon him. The Tahajjud prayer was mandatory upon him. He would pray 11 and then he would pray 2 nafils. So as far as we are concerned, there is no such limitation. We can even go beyond that, because basically you have to understand it's a nafil prayer. And there is all that we need to observe in this nafil prayer is that it has to have odd number of rakats. Odd number of rakats. That is only the thing which is stipulated. The rest is left to our discretion.
Thank you. Adil Qureshi, you can ask your question now.
I'm thinking about this Tahajjud prayer, and how Quran recommends that mu'mineen are the ones who sleep less. I have sort of 2 very related questions to this. One of them is that obviously the research and everybody tells us that getting 8 hours of sleep a night is something that a human body requires. So do these ayahs imply that they don't get enough sleep altogether, or do they make over the time that they're spending the nights during the day?
That's an interesting question. I think that people who have this routine, they will tell you that there is something very spiritual about it. Medically, yes, 6 hours of straight sleep is something which is very good for the human body. But people who have this habit of praying the Tahajjud, I think they will give you a different explanation, and they'll tell you that even if they sleep for 4 hours and then get up and then sleep again, as long as the total number of hours, for example, which is at least 6 hours of sleep, if they are met, even if you get breaks in between, I think that is probably sufficient for the human body. Although, of course, medical science, as far as I know, does recommend that the greater the stretch in one go, the better it is. But I think that this is where we need to also understand that there is a spiritual part in us. And when the Almighty tells us that this is something which it might disturb your sleep, but the amount of spiritual satisfaction that you would gain as a result would actually compensate for that lack of physical discomfort. And there are so many people who say that even that discomfort, which apparently looks to be discomfort, is no longer there, because you see, our human body adjusts to various routines. Look at the fast itself. It's so difficult at times when you have a 21-hour fast at various areas of the globe, and it's like a couple of days and your body adjusts. So I do think that in this case as well, if you have interrupted sleep, so to speak, as long as the number of hours are 6 to 8 or around about that figure, I think that it goes fine with our own bodily routine.
Right, so related question. So, if I want to build a practice of praying Tahajjud, the problem here in Pakistan, as you would imagine, is that they don't say the Jamaat, the congregation does not happen right after the Fajr prayers, except for Ramadan. They usually wait for about an hour or so before the Jamaat happens. So you have two options. Either you wake up right before the, or very close to the Fajr prayer, you pray your witr, and then right after the Azan, you pray your Fajr and get back to sleep. Try to get your 6 to 8 hours of sleep. Or the other option is, for instance, you don't pray witr altogether or tahajjud, and you simply wait till the time for the congregation is there. You pray your Fajr with Jamaat and then you go back to sleep. If I only have to choose from one of these two options, I was just curious which option would one want to go for? Is this something subjective?
What I have, I think, out of experience, what might suit people is that when the nights are short, and like in summers, it's always good to wake up as soon as you can, which is difficult after you go to sleep, and then have a short sleep and then rise for Fajr. And in winters where the nights are longish, the best thing is to you rise for at a time in which the Fajr and the Tahajjud prayer are adjacent, because you see one is going to finish and the other is going to end. So if you are able to get up in a way that you have already 5 or 6 hours of sleep, because in winters you have longish hours, so you can offer the Fajr and the Tahajjud prayer in succession. The same can go for summers as well, because you get up at a time in which this transition is taking place. But because of the fact that at this time it's not easy to get up, so one of the ways out could be that in summers you do it in this way. And by the way, there are people, and there are people who have tried the opposite as well. That in winters, what they do is they get up early for the tahajjud, and in that way they'll get a longer time to sleep between tahajjud and the fajr, because of the long nights. And then they get up again for fajr. And for the summers, they do it opposite. So what they do is they put an alarm such that the fajr and the tahajjud prayer, they come in succession. You get up at a time that it's tahajjud time, you finish the tahajjud prayer, maybe a couple of minutes would pass, and then the fajr time would arise. So I mean, these are various suggestions and practices, and every human body has its own metabolism, and all of us have a particular peculiarities also in sleeping. So it's like I think picking and choosing. And in order to get yourself this habit to that you start building up this habit, I think the best thing is that you do it on a weekend, where you have a holiday the next day. So or generally you have two holidays, or if not two, then one. Then maybe a Saturday night could be one in which you can experiment, because in case you don't have enough sleep, at least you'll be able to sleep late till morning, because you would not have the office to go to. So I think that I mean these are all kinds of options and suggestions which we can go through.
Thank you. Aisha Naz, you can ask a question now.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum. My question is this. That we know that hadith doesn't increase or decrease anything in Islam, in our religion. So I have read in Mizan, in Ghamidi Sahib's book, that he mentions that in Quran it is mentioned 5 pillars of Iman, and in hadith it is mentioned the 6th pillar. So the faith is not mentioned in Quran. So we see hadith in the light of Quran, as you know. So that means that faith is not included in 6th pillar of Islam. Iman.
Faith in one's fate. Well, that is actually something that you'll find out is a natural consequence of believing in God. It is nothing which is separate. It relates to the knowledge of God, that we have to believe in our good and bad actions, and the good and bad fate, as that narrative mentions. So this is like mentioning something which is of special importance in a different way, in a unique way. Otherwise, as far as belief in God is concerned, the belief in fate automatically encompasses that belief, because when we say that we believe in God, it automatically means that we believe that God has this knowledge of what is going to happen in future. So it doesn't need to be mentioned separately.
Rafia Khwaja, you can have your question now.
Dr. Shehzad, I wanted to know about Tarawih. This is a nafil prayer. What is the minimum number one is required to read in the Tarawih?
3 witrs. the minimum is 3 witrs that you pray just before your sehri finishes. So that is the minimum amount.
And otherwise, you can read as much as you can, because some people read 20 Taraweehs, some.
That is fine. You can, has to be odd in number. So you can read 2, 2, 2, and then read the last one as 3. I mean, the third rakat is going to make that odd, and the Prophet would also read 4, 4, 4. I mean, there were chunks of 4, and then he would read the third one, and 3 other ones in succession to make them odd. As I said, these methods have been handed out in our hadith literature. There are 3 or 4 of them, and just to create that variety in it, the Prophet used to offer them in these 3 or 4 ways.
Thank you. Aisha Najma, you can ask your question now.
I'm from Bangladesh. So in Bangladesh, we have a whole subject dedicated to the subject of religion of Islam in every year during the school years. So we have a basic idea about the life of our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But I always knew that he had 4 daughters and 2 sons. So I was very surprised when I came to know a few years back that, I think it's been a few months back, that he had another son whose name was Ibrahim and the mother was Maryam alayhi salam, because we always knew that the only mother of all his children were Hazrat Khadija radiallahu. So that was a surprise to me. And then I came to know from a quite prominent scholar in Bangladesh that Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not really married to Hazrat Maryam alayhi salam. So that was really shocking, because I think it directly goes against the basic, fundamentals of our religion. So is that really true?
Yes, it is true. Maria, her name was Maria, and the Prophet, she was the Prophet's slave maiden, and Ibrahim was born from her. And we have discussed this issue on a number of occasions. I think our moderator here might provide you with some links that what exactly was the situation or the issue that the Prophet actually kept her in his household, and she was virtually she had virtually the same rights as her wife, the rest of her wives, but of course he didn't marry her, because in those times slavery was something which was part and parcel of the society. Islam launched a gradual movement to eradicate this slavery. Earlier on, it made an appeal that people should liberate their slaves. And because of the fact that slavery was so deeply rooted, it couldn't have been done in a single directive, because the moral conditions of slave women was not that sound. And if they had been liberated, they would have just gone into the society and open up prostitution dens, and men were not that good as well, and they would have turned to beggary. So a slow process was adopted right until the end, when near the Prophet's death, just before his death, when the Qur'an had this verse which was revealed, and it said that now all the slaves which are kept, if they would like to be emancipated and liberated, they have the option to do so if they guarantee their masters that they'll not become an economic burden, and they just will buy their freedom. And in that interim period, which is about, let's say, 18 to 20 years, slavery was given protection so that gradually it could be eliminated. And it was during these years that the Prophet was gifted Maria the Copt from the Egyptian king, and the Prophet kept her, and he kept her in such a dignified way, so that he could set an example for the rest of the Muslims that during this interim period, when slavery was still allowed and it was to be totally prohibited after some time. I mean, when I say prohibited, I mean emancipation had become the rule. Until that time, because thing to be done, he didn't marry her, but because first of all, he was not allowed to marry anyone who was gifted to her by the Almighty, and all that he could do was to keep her with himself, and treat her in such a profound way, and set such a profound example that in that interim period, when the rest of the Muslims were also having slave women, they would be given this example that this is how you treat your slaves. They're virtually like your wives. But as I said, that after that directive, in which it became compulsory that all slaves would like to go free. They were given this choice. Only those slaves who, out of their own wish, didn't desire to go, they were too old, or they had other issues, they were allowed to stay. And the other important thing which happened immediately after Islam was that the greatest source of slavery or slave women were prisoners of war. So free women would be captured in wars and they would be converted into slaves. So immediately Islam stopped this practice, and in the very first battle which took place in Islam, which is the Battle of Badr, it was made mandatory that you just cannot capture any women and make them slaves. So it was like a two-pronged approach, that on the one hand, new slaves could not be made, existed for so many hundreds of years. A gradual strategy was adopted to do away with them. So I've just briefly described this. Otherwise, there are several talks on this and written material as well that might be of interest to you, and you can consult them. So this is actually the background of this question.
Thank you so much. But did he ever marry her in the end, before, as long as he was alive? In the end?
No, he never married her. No, she was like that because the Quran had stopped her from marrying any women who were gifted to her. Because always this is something which he was only allowed to marry in a particular affair. This is mentioned in Surah Ahzab. And she could have only married her cousins who had migrated with her. He could have only married women who had been set free and captured as prisoners of war, and set free, and then out of their own will they wished to marry the Prophet. And then finally women who would have wanted to dedicate themselves. So these are the three categories which are explicitly mentioned if you pick up Surah Ahzab, where the marriages of the Prophet are mentioned. So he's being told explicitly that he just cannot marry women out of this affair. And Maria, the Copt, she didn't belong to any of these affairs, so she had to be kept like this by the Prophet. One more thing that might help you in understanding this very complex question is that you see what seems to be a norm today may not be a norm centuries ago. Today, this is something which is an anathema we just cannot even think of. But this was something which is part and parcel of a society 14 centuries ago. It was like a norm. People thought it to be something very normal, although it was a thing which was proscribed. By the very tone of the Quran, or the very first verses of the Quran said "Fakku rakaba," which meant it was a huge appeal that you release these necks, let them go out of the bondage. They have been born free. Don't make them come into your bondage. So the message of Islam was absolutely clear the very first day. But as I said, because of the fact that it was so deeply rooted, that immediately ordering all women who were slaves or men who were slaves in houses, it would have caused havoc in the society. Not only economic havoc, but also, as I said, moral havoc, because most of these women who were slaves, they didn't have a very high moral conduct.
Dr. Shehzad, now we have come to the end of the lineup.
Okay, inshallah, we'll see each other tomorrow.